The Green Bay Packers are set up to compete in 2025, but there are still questions about who's going to be a long-term piece, a core member of the Packers moving forward.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes our show, our wonderful show here, Locked On Packers, your first listen every day. I hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. I've been on vacation. I almost forgot the intro to my own show. But thank you again for everyone making us your first listen. And we really do appreciate it. As I mentioned, vacation. I hope you have had some time this summer at some point. I'm actually still on vacation as we record this. For those of you watching, you'll be able to see. If you're not watching on YouTube, I don't know, you can go do that. Why not? You can see that I actually shaved my face. But don't worry, it's not a long-term choice. The Leap put together our annual list of the best players on the Packers, regardless of positional value, our 90-man rosters. And we're not going to spoil it. The first of those are out today, but I thought it would be a great place to look at, because the way that I did it when I went through my rankings, because it can be a little bit daunting to look at 90 players, most of whom you've heard of, but certainly not all. And if you're not locked into every little piece of transactional news that comes out, you might go, I'm sorry, is that a Packers player? Is that an actor on the Bear that I've never heard of? Like, what exactly is happening here? And so I said, okay, I'm gonna just put together this tier list. Okay, this is the absolute no doubt core of this team, at least this year and in the short run. And then I put together, okay, these are the starters, the quality starters that I think are entrenched, at least for the moment. And then there's the role players that they either are just going to be role players this year. It's mostly young players who you're like, okay, what is this moving forward? Have they carved out their role on the team? There is this huge list of backups and not core pieces, but developmental type pieces. And then there's the I don't want to call them the roster flotsam, because that would be uncharitable to guys who are making their living doing this. But these are players who are either undrafted free agents, they're borderline NFL players who are at the very least unproven and don't come in with the kind of pedigree and fanfare that some of these other players do, almost exclusively that last group. And we're not going to dive too deep into that last group. But the top group was the one that I found clearly the easiest, but where to hit that cutoff. So when we do our rankings, we assign everybody a numerical grade, but we don't, and maybe we should, frankly, in future years. Maybe we should tier it differently. We've always just created somewhat arbitrary cutoffs, mostly for ease of not overwhelming everybody with the number of posts that we put out, and then to facilitate ties, because there's going to be times when that's when there's two people doing something, there's just going to be these mathematical moments where you're like, okay, well, it ends up being averaging out to these same numbers, and we have to do it with two people. There's no way to break the tie there. I suppose we could have a vote, or we could have a third person come in and break the tie. But I wonder if moving forward, and I'll pitch this to Jason, if we think about doing this in tiers rather than, okay, here's 10 guys, here's 15 guys, or whatever the numbers end up being in a given post. I felt like that was a useful way to go through this exercise, and so we're going to go through it together. In that first tier for me, this is remember, position agnostic. So we do not care about positional value for the purposes of this exercise. It is just who are the best players on this team. So that tier for me: Xavier McKinney, Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, Zach Tom, Tucker Kraft, Elton Jenkins, Rashawn Gary, Edgerrin Cooper, Jaden Reed, Kenny Clark. That is particularly interesting to me for two players, Elton Jenkins and Kenny Clark, because those guys might not be on the roster next year. So these are core pieces of your team who could potentially become cap casualties in a year. This is the whole point of Elton Jenkins' holdout right now. He's going, look, I am a core piece. I deserve to be a core piece. And I'm worried that I'm going to change positions and you're going to see dollar signs in a year go, I can save $20 million as the Packers. And why, it's been fun, Elton, but go somewhere else. And Kenny Clark has just not been the same player. Now, he was hurt last year. We know that. But he's also a defensive lineman hitting that age cliff where, especially for someone as athletic as he was at his physical apex prime, he's just not that guy anymore, it doesn't seem. Or at least can't be that guy as regularly anymore. So do you have players to come in and replace the pass rush, the ability to eat double teams and stop the run, as well as create some pass rush, even if that has to be two players? But the thing that made Kenny Clark so good when he was at his best was if on first down you wanted to run the ball, he made it just as difficult as if you wanted to throw the ball. And those types of players, there's a reason he got a near market contract, a near top of market contract for a nose tackle when he did, because there just aren't that many guys that can affect the game in both of those ways. There just aren't. Most of the three techniques who dominate the game as pass rushers also dominate the game as penetrating run defenders. They are splash run defenders for the most part. And then most nose tackles just straight up aren't pass rushers. Now, there have become more and more of these guys, Justin Metabike and Dexter Lawrence, to name a couple, Vita Vea at his prime. They're guys who, and those guys can move around the front as well. And Kenny Clark has moved around the front. He's become more of a three technique, and I think part of that has been to save his body. But where are they getting that production if not from Kenny Clark moving forward? Or is there going to be a bounce back here? And that's a question answered. The only borderline name here for me, where I was like, does he belong here? Does he not? Is Jaden Reed, because I have said I believe he is the one young receiver on this team before Matthew Golden and Savion Williams joined that I thought could be or had the best chance of being extended. I still believe that, and we'll get to this next group here, but is he capable of being the kind of player you can funnel your offense through? This is still the fundamental question with Jaden Reed. Can you funnel your offense through him? Can you run your offense through him? And there have been games when that has been true. There have been stretches of games, a month's worth of games. We saw at the start of last season, even when Malik Willis was the quarterback. And in fact, and then Malik Willis against the Jaguars, when they needed a play, they dialed up something for Jaden Reed. He was their zone buster last year. I still think if he doesn't get hurt against the Eagles, they have a chance to win that game. He was the biggest factor against zone coverages last year, and the Packers, I think, are going to continue to see a ton of man coverage. They need someone that can beat man coverage. Can Jaden Reed ever be that guy? I think Matthew Golden is here. I think Savion Williams is here to answer those questions for Jaden Reed, so Jaden Reed doesn't necessarily have to. But he is clearly right now, because he's stayed mostly healthy, the guy that they funnel touches to, even though he did not lead the team in targets last year, and is, when you just need a play, a dynamic play, he has been the guy to create that for them. And there's value in that to me. I think he is the most consistent receiver on this team. And I do wonder what a team where your Jaden Reed is one of your 10 best players, and Jaden Reed is like maybe not in the top 25 receivers in the NFL. I continue to wonder about the construction of a roster and the upside of a roster that looks like that. Now, as we'll see, this roster is extremely deep. And that is ultimately what the Packers are going to have to hang their head on. They're going to have to get some high-end production in here somewhere. Can they get it from this next group of players? We'll talk about them in a second here on Locked On Packers. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. If you share finances with someone, it is useful to be able to put all that stuff in one place for everyone to see everything and to have some visibility, to have some transparency on what's happening there. It just makes it so much easier. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. This next group of players, to me, is going to decide the outcome of the Green Bay Packers season. I think the best players on the team, like Xavier McKinney, all pro. Josh Jacobs, one of the 4 or 5 best running backs in the league last year. I think he was one of the 3 best running backs in the league last year. Jordan Love, look, we're going to talk about Jordan Love later in the week, but he is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league. I think Zach Tom, Tucker Kraft, those guys can be difference makers. We've seen it. This is the group of guys where you go, okay, what can you get from this group? These are your, no doubt, these guys are going to contribute in a meaningful way to your team this year, assuming they are healthy and assuming they don't get traded in one case. Nate Hobbs at the top of this list, and Evan Williams. Then I have the 3 receivers, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, and Romeo Doubs. I think Watson would be higher based purely on talent. The injury is going to be the question mark here. The availability is going to be the question mark here. Watson, Doubs, Wicks. Can any of them take a step forward here? And they're all, right now, they have to be ahead of Matthew Golden. We just don't know what Matthew Golden is going to be. The Packers used a first round pick on Matthew Golden precisely because they did not think this group was good enough. But we do not have any evidence at this moment, as we stand here today in late June, that Golden is going to be any better. We'll get to Matthew Golden and his place on this list in a second. So those 3 receivers, now again, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, do they make it all the way through training camp? If Matthew Golden is the player the Packers hope he can be, well, then maybe not. But he's still a good player. Like if you think about the rankings on this list, right? We're talking about the 11th through 21st. That's this tier. Well, you have 22 starters. Now I have a kicker in here, so I guess it's 23. But knowing you're 1 through 21 and feeling locked in about that, that's a really good place to be. That's a really good place to be. And the one starter who I think is not here is Aaron Banks. I guess Lucas Van Ness is also in the next tier if you believe he's going to be a starter. So there are some backups because I do have 4 total receivers already listed here. So we have to massage the numbers a little bit. So then I have those 3 receivers. Devontae Wyatt is next. He's the guy to me defensively. We talked about this a week or 2 ago. That if he stays healthy, can be your Kenny Clark insurance, can be the guy where you go, well, we don't have to have Kenny Clark have the kind of season we're used to seeing him have because you have someone as talented as Devontae Wyatt rushing the passer. And 2 years ago, he was a better, more consistent pass rusher. But last year, when we saw the flashes, his talent, when he gets it cranked up, is impressive, and he has made improvements. I did not think when he was coming out of Georgia, there was enough there in terms of polish, in terms of what was in his pass rush bag. He has expanded that. I thought a 24-year-old player. How much more physical upside is there for him? And at that point, it's a question of work ethic. Are you going to work? Why at 24 do you not have a better array of pass rush moves? Why are you still relying solely on your athleticism? But he has clearly put in the work and has been coached the right way in the NFL. And maybe that means the right offseason work as well. That certainly is in play here. A lot of the technique work and pass rush work that gets done with, professional pass rush coaches like Eddie McGilvra, who's been on this program before now at Sacramento State, but has worked with guys like Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt to help them in the offseason refine their skills. This group of players, again, is going to determine the season. I have Brandon McManus here, then Rasheed Walker, Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, Jordan Morgan. If this group of players are as good as they can be, and as good as the Packers think they can be, Nate Hobbs, Evan Williams, the three receivers after Jaden Reed, Devontae Wyatt, Rasheed Walker, who's probably going to be the starting left tackle, I still believe that, Keyshawn Nixon, so this is your starting secondary. Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, Nate Hobbs, and then Jordan Morgan, wherever he slots in. I think they are going to bend over backwards to make sure Jordan Morgan is in the starting lineup. The only reason you're going to give him a chance to start in multiple places is because you believe in his ability that much, and you're going to give him every opportunity to prove that. Now, this is the interesting thing to me here about this group, because the next group informs this set of choices. So I just went through, I suppose, 20 of the 22 starters on this team. My 22 through 37 are all players who could contribute meaningfully to this team. And if they played, you'd go, cool, great. And I guess if I'm doing the math right here, I think we must have only gotten to 19 based on the numbers that we have left here. Because this next group is Brenton Cox, Aaron Banks, who's a starter, Matthew Golden, Quay Walker, who's a starter, Sean Ryan, Carrington Valentine, Malik Willis, definitely not a starter, Lucas Van Ness, who's a starter, or probably going to start, Carl Brooks, Anthony Belton, Luke Musgrave, Daniel Wheeland, punter, but we don't count him, Kingsley Enagbare, Marshawn Lloyd, Matt Orzik, long snapper, Savion Williams. All of those guys are going to play. And all of those guys are varying degrees of I'm happy to see that guy out there. That's 37 players, 34 position players. So 3 special teamers in there, which, by the way, isn't it refreshing that your special teamers are in there? You go 34 deep, it's a 53-man roster. You only can play 22. That is the superpower of this team if it has one. It is built to withstand a normal or even higher than normal amount of attrition in a season. And attrition is just the reality. Now, usually you get to the end of the season and you look up at the team that's winning the Super Bowl. It's the team that stayed the healthiest. The Philadelphia Eagles last year, in addition to having the most talented roster in the NFL, did stay incredibly healthy over the course of the season. So you do need some of that. But you also need a roster that is built. And the Chiefs have done a great job of this. They're just like, whoever else we can throw in there, and we'll figure this out. Because they're really well coached. And that has been the Packers over the last few years in the Matt LaFleur era, really. They have been able to make it work. And their scouting staff has done such a tremendous job going out and finding the Devondre Campbells and the Rasul Douglases of the world to add to your team mid-season and for the rest of a potentially long-term partnership. I mean, they ended up signing both Rasul Douglas and Devondre Campbell. It worked out in the case of Rasul Douglas. They ended up getting compensation for him in addition to the quality play from him. And then, you get the fall off, the injuries from Devondre Campbell, the crash out on the way out the door, all those things. But he was instrumental in a 13-win season and a chance to go compete for a Super Bowl in 2021. There's just no doubt about that. So you've built this team now with just, almost ridiculous levels of depth. And that is is incredibly beneficial, right? Like that, there's just no way around thinking that that's really good for your football team to have those levels of depth, to feel like, hey, all of these guys here, 1 through 37, have a chance to help your team. And then I haven't even mentioned Isaiah McDuffie, who might be a base linebacker in 4-3. Isaiah Simmons, who's, there's this next tier of players, some of whom I think are going to have to take a jump or risk being on the chopping block. We'll talk about that group of players and the rest of this team, because there's still some fun names to get into here. That's next on Locked On Packers. There's really only one tier of players left when it comes to the actual roster, because you can only have 53. You've got your practice squad, and that actually works out perfectly in this case, because from 38 to 64, you get your 10 guys on the practice squad. So this is basically your roster then. And it's more or less the names Isaiah McDuffie, Isaiah Simmons, McCole Hardman, Barron Sorrell. I don't know if McCole Hardman's going to make the team. Emmanuel Wilson, Bo Melton, Chris Brooks, Malik Heath, Zane Anderson, Kamal Haddon, Donovan Jennings, Kalen King, Sean Clifford, Aaron Mosby, Tyron Hopper. Oof. Day 3 pick or 3rd round pick. Not great. Keaton Oladapo. That's 53. And then there's this group of players that I still think have a very good chance to make this roster. Ben Sims, Nazir Stackhouse as a defensive tackle, undrafted free agent. Colby Wooden, who's been a rotational defensive lineman on this team. Colin Oliver, who's an intriguing pass rusher. Kadeem Telfort, who had to play in a playoff game last year. Christian Welch, Travis Glover, who had to play in a playoff game last year. Jacob Monk, John Williams, 7th round pick. Warren Brinson, 6th round pick. Michael Robinson, day 3 pick. That's your roster. And you at least know the names of all of those guys. Isaiah McDuffie has had to play real snaps for the Packers. Isaiah Simmons was a former top 10 pick, a starter on a number of defenses. McCole Hardman was a starter, really, in 11 personnel on a multi-time Super Bowl champ and was making plays in the spring. Barron Sorrell, a much ballyhooed 4th round pick. He's down here in the 40s. Emmanuel Wilson is probably their 3rd running back, and Chris Brooks is their 4th running back. They seem comfortably on this team. Bo Melton, 2 years ago, they were running plays for him in a playoff game. Now they're trying him at corner. I still think he's on this team. Yes, I think you can point to the corner move, and I think more was made of that than we really needed to. But they're trying to find ways to keep him on the team. They would like him to be around. That's the kind of depth that this team has. Zane Anderson had to start games for the Packers. Had to play meaningful snaps. Kamal Haddon might have to, at some point, play real snaps for the Packers. I still have a lot of hope and faith in Donovan Jennings to develop into something as an interior offensive lineman. Maybe we did a segment, 2 weeks ago, about how he might be the center of the future. They gave him some center reps, and that turned my brain. I was okay. Oh, that's interesting. What if he's the developmental guy everyone really likes? Has the tools, has the size, experience in college, been banged up in the NFL, but could he be, if you're eventually going to move on from Elton Jenkins, whether it's this offseason or next, could he be the future of that position? Aaron Mosby played reps as a pass rusher, made some plays last year as a pass rusher. He's 51 on my list. 51. Now, he's a borderline roster player, but then guys after him, Tyron Hopper, I don't think he's a lock to make this team. Keaton Oladapo, I don't think he's a lock to make this team. Ben Sims, they're running plays for Ben Sims in the low red zone last year. Don't think he's a lock to make this team. Nazir Stackhouse is I have him ahead of Warren Brinson just because from a draft pedigree standpoint, he was considered to be the better player, even though the Packers don't think that. Colin Oliver, I wanted to put higher on this list, frankly. I don't think Kadeem Telfort is a lock to make this roster. He just played in a playoff game for the Packers. Now, backup, but he was playing. Travis Glover, he's 60th on my list. Just had to play in a playoff game. These guys are going to have to get opportunities here at some point. Like the numbers over the course of an NFL season say they're just going to have a chance. They're just going to get a chance to play because this is a violent, brutal sport. It's just the reality of the game. And we haven't even mentioned some guys further down the list, guys like Gregory Jr., who was getting some run with the ones in the spring. Jonathan Baldwin, an undrafted free agent who they paid real money to. John Fitzpatrick, who played last year for the Packers. Mosiah Swinson, who was part of the UDFA prospectus, I think 2 years ago now. Julian Hicks, who's a player that I like, may get an opportunity, may not. Taylor Elgersma, the Canadian quarterback, I think he's like a guarantee for your practice squad if he can make it there. Sam Brown Jr., who's, to me, an intriguing receiver prospect for the Packers, probably going to be a practice squad player. This is a lot of guys. And this is why I go back to whether it is a receiver or a different position, it really does feel like, and I know it doesn't happen in the NFL the way it does in the NBA, but it feels like there's too many guys vying for these spots. And I know that I'm always the one on this show saying you never really have too many guys. But I think part of the thing about this Packers roster in particular is that you look, I mean, we just did this exercise from number 11 through like 38. How big a difference? We talk about this like with the draft, right? What is the difference between the 15th best player in this draft and the 45th best player in this draft? Packers roster is kind of like that. Like how different is the 12th best player on the Packers versus the 30th best player on the Packers? The drop off from starter to backup on most teams is enormous. I think the Packers have to feel like they've got 15 starters on both sides of the ball. Well, that's a really good place to be, but then guys want to play. Guys get hurt and then they have to play. But this comes back to the question about, do you have enough true difference makers? And do you need to go find one if you don't? It's a little late in the game for that. So then where is it going to come from if it's going to come from somewhere? And that's why I feel like that list that I gave in the last segment, if Evan Williams turns into, the high-end Adrian Amos outcome for the Eddie Jackson, Xavier McKinney comp. That Vic Fangio Bears, like just he's a difference maker, but just absolutely always in the right position, makes every tackle, makes every play. Early Packers, Adrian Amos, that guy who's like a Pro Bowl kind of caliber player. That's what you need. Or you need Dontavian Wicks to realize the full potential of his ability as a separator that turned into making plays on the ball, which is your job as a receiver. Can Devontae Wyatt take that step? Former first-round pick, the talent, man, the physical tools are incredible. But can you put it together? Can you stay healthy? Javon Bullard, you're focusing on one position now. You are the nickel, and not even the nickel all the time. Because I still think Nate Hobbs, in certain situations, I think on 3rd and 8, if Justin Jefferson's going to be in the slot, if you're going to play man coverage, you may want Nate Hobbs there instead of Javon Bullard. But I think the talent for Javon Bullard is there. I think Jordan Morgan, if you can solidify that right guard spot so that Rasheed Walker can take that left tackle spot so that Elton Jenkins can be that node-out center, you've elevated, you've force multiplied the offense. If Nate Hobbs can take even a step forward, I mean, I remember he was one of the highest graded corners in the league as a rookie. And by the way, was a Packers type without question coming out of college. Was someone I thought they would target in the draft and was kind of frankly surprised they didn't. I think there's still potential in there for him. He's got to stay healthy. And I think this is a defense, Jeff Hafley, that can unlock him. If you get hey, I'm actually one of the like 12 or 14 best corners in the league now. Well, you've elevated this team, and that's what this team needs right now. All right, back this week. We're going to be back Wednesday. And we're going to do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday with the holiday this week, and then back to a normal schedule the following week where we're back to 5 maybe 4 sprinkled in there, but 5 days a week because look, once we get into July, it's practically training camp. So July's, in 5 minutes from now, and then 10 minutes after that, it's training camp. So we're going to have a lot to talk about as we move forward here through July. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. That's also where you can find me on Instagram. Check out everything we're doing on our social media channels with Locked On Packers, all around the internet. Go subscribe over on our YouTube page, subscribe wherever you find podcasts so you can stay Locked On Packers.